Hi everyone, I'm Gardner Goldsmith, and this is the final episode of College Unbound Series 1. And appropriately, as we record outside of the hearth and the tavern, it's gloomy, it's raining outside. It seems to be very fitting for some of the subject matter that we've covered over the past 10 episodes. And this is episode 11 of College Unbound, our final in this series exploring Marxism and collectivism. You know, throughout the series, we've been able to explore the people and ideas behind some of the most egregious crimes in human history. Mass arrests, property theft, extortion, separation of families, kidnapping, rape, arson, human experimentation, eugenics, slavery, mass incarceration, international aggression, spying, indoctrination, famine, and mass murder, all are the hallmarks of the collectivism that we've seen in action. Yet many politicians and utopian commentators recklessly claim, quote, true socialism hasn't been tried, end quote. Well, it has. And if our overview in this series has not provided enough examples, let's explore more from American shores and American history. You know, if anyone says American socialism has never been tried, let's explain something to that person. Indeed, it has. In the earliest days of American history, it has been tried. And if the people who tried it had not changed their ways, well, there might not be an America as we know it. And there certainly would be no such thing as Thanksgiving. From our online learning series to you, for each Thanksgiving, let's remember the lessons from that special holiday and what it shows us. We can hear the warnings of the past and bring them to the present. So let's explore our final lesson, Thanksgiving, the celebration that holds great significance in our battle to respect individual autonomy, free will, and free markets. Why? Because Thanksgiving wasn't what many government school teachers claim it was. It wasn't established because the Pilgrims wanted to thank the natives for their help. Sure, the Pilgrims ended up getting along with some of the natives and got tips from them, but that wasn't why the early settlers started Thanksgiving. In fact, it takes very little time to find out why the Pilgrims created the holiday. Governor William Bradford told us in his own words, the Pilgrims started Thanksgiving because they were thankful to God for helping them turn away from collectivism, the system that almost wiped them out. And they were thankful that they embraced private property and free enterprise. Not many people learn this in government-run schools. In fact, a teacher with whom I worked once tried to push the ignorant canard that real communism has never been tried. And another teacher held very firmly to her self-made fantasy that it was the weather that saved the Pilgrims. It wasn't the weather. And as we've seen in this learning series, communism has been tried over and over, always leading to disaster. In fact, before Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto and prior to Rousseau writing his Social Contract and Discourse on Inequality, the collectivist scheme had been tried by the governing body of the Pilgrims in 1620, and it led to starvation, death, misery, anger, and the near destruction of Plymouth Plantation. From the 16th to the 17th centuries, England was in turmoil. The Protestant Reformation and creation of the Anglican Church had seen a profound split by the United Kingdom from Roman Catholicism, and many battles occurred between Catholics and Protestants for control. Now, within that struggle, there were other sectarian conflicts. The Puritans were Calvinists, who were persecuted by the Anglican king and didn't think the Anglican Church was pure enough. So, some Puritans fled the strife in England to live in the free market, free religion nation of Holland, which had recently won its independence from Spain. For over 10 years, the Pilgrims enjoyed the fruits of Holland's free trade system. They had ample opportunities to work and prosper, but many of them didn't like the fact that their children were becoming, in their eyes, quote, too Dutch, end quote, and straying away from the strict Calvinist lifestyle. They decided to resettle in America. And here comes the bonus lesson in economics we can learn from the voyage. It's the knowledge that taxation of the so-called wealthy, however politicians define that, destroys leveraged capital and wipes out investment in possibly important ventures. It wasn't as if these British pilgrims simply could shell out enough cash to hire 2 ships and buy provisions to sail west. Instead, thanks to the fact that they were in the bustling, laissez-faire nation of Holland, they were able to secure investors. Indeed, the only reason Plymouth Plantation was established was because a group of Dutch capitalists had enough expendable surplus to see the Pilgrim effort as a worthy investment and sponsor the trip. They simply asked in exchange for portions of the furs and valuables the Pilgrims could send back as profit. Sadly, the Pilgrims ran into trouble of their own making. Not only was the second ship Speedwell unseaworthy and left behind, the Pilgrims originally planned to sail to Virginia, but missed their target. Worst of all, they established a political economic system of command and control collectivism, whereby no one was allowed to own and control his or her own property. And this is where the big lesson is learned. This is where Thanksgiving has its roots. In fact, despite help from natives, the communist system Governor William Bradford oversaw led to terrible internal conflict, resentment, sloth, and poor harvests. Starvation for many resulted. And here is William Bradford, in his own words, describing their attempt to establish the, quote, Platonic ideal, end quote, by prohibiting private property and mandating communal lives. He describes the horrible results. Quote, the experience that was held in this common course and condition tried sundry years, and that amongst godly and sober men may well evince the vanity of that conceit of Plato's and other ancients applauded by some of later times, that the taking away of property and bringing in community into a commonwealth would make them happy and flourishing, as if they were wiser than God. For this community, so far as it was found to breed confusion and discontent and retard much employment that would have been to their benefit and comfort. Bradford goes on to note, for the young men that were most able and fit for labor and service did repine that they should spend their time and strength to work for other men's wives and children without any recompense. The strong, or man of parts, had no more in division of victuals and clothes than he that was weak and not able to do a quarter the other could. This was thought injustice. The aged and graver men to be ranked and equalized in labors and victuals, clothes, etc., with the meaner and younger sort, thought it some indignity and disrespect unto them. And for the feminists out there, if Karl Marx's adoration of patriarchal relations isn't enough to turn you away from socialism, here's what collectivism in action wrought. And for men's wives to be commanded to do service for other men, as dressing their meat, washing their clothes, etc., they deemed it a kind of slavery. Neither could many husbands well brook it. Upon the point all being to have alike, and all to do alike, they thought themselves in the like condition, and one as good as another. And so, if it did not cut off those relations that God hath set amongst men, yet it did at least much diminish and take off the mutual respects that should be preserved amongst them, and would have been worse if they had been of another condition. Let none object that this is men's corruption, and nothing to the course itself. I answer, seeing all men have this corruption in them, God in his wisdom saw another course fitter for them. And that course was the allowance of private property and trade, which led to vast riches and surplus, happiness and prosperity. Here's Bradford's explicit testimony about it. Quote, so they began to think how they might raise as much corn as they could and obtain a better crop than they had done, that they might not still thus languish in misery. At length, after much debate of things, the governor, with the advice of the chiefest among them, gave way that they should set corn every man for his own particular, and in that regard trust to themselves, and all other things to go on in the general way as before, and so assign to every family a parcel of land, according to the proportion of their number, for that end only, for present use, but made no division for inheritance, and ranged all boys and youth under some family. This had very good success, for it made all hands very industrious, so as much more corn was planted than otherwise would have been by any means the governor or any other could use, and saved him a great deal of trouble and gave far better content. The women now went willingly into the field and took their little ones with them to set corn, which before would allege weakness and inability, whom to have compelled would have been thought great tyranny and oppression. Well said. The first Thanksgiving was a celebration of God helping the Pilgrims find a path away from tyranny, away from oppression, away from envy and starvation. They found a path away from collectivism. Thanksgiving came about because of the surplus the free market system allowed the settlers to achieve. It's all about freedom, about free will, subjective valuation, division of labor, resource creation, surplus, trade, and freedom of association, all of which are put in peril by the state. Ah yes, the Platonic ideal. From Plato's tyrannical republic, where private property was verboten and people's lives were controlled by the so-called philosopher kings, to Thomas Hobbes's, Rousseau's, contemporary leftists, and even many so-called conservatives' errant claim of a magical social contract, the predators and promoters of the state peddle all kinds of erroneous, feel-good collectivist phrasing to hide what they're actually doing, which is stealing your God-given liberty and individualism. Let me be explicit for everyone, especially conservatives. There is no social contract. A contract is a private agreement between two or more individuals made voluntarily and recognized by others. The state imposes its will. It does not ask. It is involuntary, which is why it is a state and not a business. But some claim that you accept this so-called contract because you live here and you don't flee, which is quite an assumption. It's the rhetoric of the mafia. It's the mindset of the thug who assumes you have some place to which you can flee and the means to do it. It assumes your reasons for you, simply to make it easier to excuse the predation of their government plans. And to claim, as many contemporary leftists do, that the social contract was made through democracy, through majority rule, is to employ another collectivist misdirection, hiding the gangland imposition of the will of the gang over a smaller group or an individual by use of the term democracy. Aristotle used the term democracy to describe the evil of majority rule without a constitution that supposedly would restrain the power of the government, which is one of the major reasons the founders wrote the U.S. Constitution. But the U.S. Constitution has not held back the cancerous growth of collectivist coercion and theft. In fact, even constitutions are imposed by majority rule. So, as Christian anarchist philosophers through the ages have noted, the idea that a constitution, which is a political imposition and is brought about by majority vote, somehow will protect people from majority rule is something of a non-starter. Think of this fertile ground for exploration. Ancient Ireland had a non-state, non-tax system of voluntary, peaceful interaction called the Brehon Law. And as Kevin Flanagan Combs of the Brehon Law Academy notes, they understood the difference between society and the state. There was no central government, no central constitution, just simple traditional market-based justice and predominantly peaceful tribal interaction that lasted over 1,000 years.
In ancient times, there was no Ireland that we think of as one nation, one people. It didn't exist. There was actually about 140 private countries within Ireland, with several thousand people in each country. And it was from within these people, it was a kind of an economic hub. Within this economic hub, they were called tua. The word for this was a tua. It's a bit like a tribe, but not necessarily like a tribe. The best way to describe it, it's the closest idea of what we think of as a state, but it was an economic hub with free men who associated together through contract. There's a principle of law that says, and it's a logical fact, that no man can be obliged to do something unless he has agreed to do it. So my question I always ask the people, at what point did the obligation to follow the rules and statutes of the state begin? When did you agree to this?
Viking Age Iceland had a similar religious-based society and justice system called the Goddard system that lasted 800 years. Is it too much to open windows into these good examples from history and see that peace and prosperity come through free will and the freedom to worship and speak? And as we think about the stark differences between the evils of Marxism, collectivism, and the great peaceful progress of free will and free markets, as we hear contemporary politicians and media pundits of all stripes tell us that we must do X, Y, or Z, can we not remember that we is a pronoun of forced inclusion when it's used through the government? It's being imposed on you, trying to fool you into thinking you must comply and follow in lockstep to a collectivist march that avoids examples of freedom in history even as it hides its own dark and tragic past.
Almost 30 years before the publication of 1984, however, Russian writer Yevgeny Zamyatin wrote We. We was reportedly the first work banned by the Soviet Union's censorship board. Ultimately, Zamyatin arranged for We to be smuggled to the West for publication and didn't live to see it eventually published in his own country until 1988. We is set in the distant future and follows the protagonist with the designation D503. People don't have names there. D503 is a spacecraft engineer in one state, a heavily surveilled urban nation where society is run strictly by logic and behaviour is based on formulas and equations outlined by the one state.
Don't let them close down your mind or your liberty. Stand for truth. Please remember and spread the word. And please remember these comments from people who are very familiar with collectivism, with its anti-liberty philosophy, its history, and its tragic consequences. Here's Ernesto Gonzalez, an American whose family fled collectivism, an American who sees the danger we face.
Okay, my name is Ernesto Gonzalez, and I have a message for everyone. I arrived in Cuba on July 5th, 1968, after living under communism for altogether 7 years, having an opportunity to return in 1997 to 2001. We left as a family, just the three of us, my parents and myself, for one major reason: for the oppression, for the lies, for the persecution, for the lack of opportunity, for the police state that exists in a communist society, and the complete lack of freedom for individual expression. Everything is about the collective, is about what they think is best for you and not for yourself or for society. They care nothing about people. They care nothing about alternate points of view. We escaped a totalitarian system because we were searching for freedom, and we found it here in the United States. And I do warn all of you out there who may be considering that socialism or communism is something appealing. It is not. It comes as an attractive package, and an attractive package that is unrealistic is a lie, and is there for you to accept it. Once you accept it, the literally the unmasking comes out and you see the full devilish intentions of the originators.
Please remember Ernesto's words, and please keep close to your heart the knowledge of millions who've been wiped out by the advocates of collectivism. As we discussed previously in College Unbound, collectivism is an intellectual, philosophical grifter. Its advocates will try any avenue of attack, testing various vectors along the way, then integrating what has worked or has set up a next phase of greater government control. Here in the West, from education to communication to travel to healthcare and many other of the most minute aspects of life, government interference, subsidies, welfare, and control have been established to block us from making our own free choices and from allowing the market to produce the best products and services in greater abundance. And as technological sophistication and state integration increase, the collectivists will not need to employ the same tactics that tyrants in the Soviet Union, China, Germany, and others employed. The adversaries of freedom already have created a sweeping collectivist control system. They already have mimicked German and Soviet physical barriers with their anti-constitutional TSA and FCC, and they have created a statutory regulatory cage to trap us. But now these barriers are being combined with technology. From banking to trade to medicine to travel, they'll try to control our lives and choices in all those ways. The barriers aren't just physical, as they were in communist East Berlin.
The wall was the border between the Eastern Bloc and the West. But the wall was much more than a political division. It divided families, it divided communities, and it also killed people. At least 138 people were killed or died at the wall, including 100 East Germans who died while trying to flee. One of the first people who died as a result of the Berlin Wall was Günther Litvin, a tailor from East Berlin. 11 days after the wall went up, he tried to escape through a canal. A policeman shot him dead.
My brother jumped into the water from the grounds of the Charité hospital when he heard, coming from the bridge, "Stop, we'll shoot." And he couldn't believe that shots would be fired, since until then no one had ever been shot.
Today, Jürgen Litvin runs a memorial close to the place where Günther Litvin died. Many tourists come to see the original watchtower. From up here, you sense how minimal the chances were of those who tried to flee.
I own a piece of the Berlin Wall. Soviet communists built it between collectivist East Berlin and free West Berlin to stop people from escaping to freedom. After decades of separation in 1989, friends and family tore it down, and I was able to acquire a chunk of that terrible barrier, to prove to people that it existed. Today, collectivists are adding many other kinds of walls to their arsenal. But the most formidable walls to our freedom are ignorance of history and a lack of adherence to the Golden Rule. Together, we can fight. We can celebrate the heritage of freedom we've been granted. From the birth of Christ to the Pilgrims changing their ways, we can remember, and we can teach others about these principles in history. We have a chance to stand for ethics and human dignity, to see the bright out of the darkness. Our forebears handed us this responsibility so that we may preserve liberty and pass on the principles to our children. So let's do so. Thank you for watching, everyone. Thank you for caring, for spreading the word, and for being part of College Unbound from the MRC. We hope you found kindred spirits here and that you've appreciated and enjoyed what we've put together. And I've been very happy to enjoy the series with you. If you'd like, don't forget, you can get all the texts by entering the Share This Episode tab. And you can watch again, pause, take some notes, and pass on the information to those you love and respect, especially those who might be interested in homeschooling their kids. For everyone at MRC, thank you again for believing in liberty. Be seeing you. I hope you'll like what we're creating. This new endeavor is designed for you, and I hope you'll link through to the official site and sign on. You'll get special access to all the new videos, you'll get the fun quizzes you can take anytime, and you'll get special ideas to share with friends at this crucial time to gain in wisdom. It's all free. I hope you'll get in there and enjoy it.